Jake thought his biggest problem was a housing mix-up, until a barefoot stranger in his bed taught him that sometimes the best things in life are the ones that completely ruin your plans. It was almost 10 at night when Jake finally climbed the 3 flights of stairs to his small apartment. His backpack felt heavy with textbooks, and all he wanted was to collapse on his bed and forget about the research paper that was due next week. He'd been living in this tiny studio for 2 years now, and it was his sanctuary. Everything had its place. His books were arranged by subject, his desk was spotless, and his bed was always made with military precision. Jake fumbled for his keys in the dim hallway light. The building was old and the landlord was too cheap to install proper lighting, but Jake didn't mind. He knew every creaky floorboard and every scratch on his door. This was his space, his rules, his peace. But when he turned the key and pushed open the door, everything changed in an instant. Someone was sitting on his bed. Jake's heart nearly jumped out of his chest. For a moment he thought he was in the wrong apartment. But no, there was his desk, his bookshelf, his small kitchen in the corner. Everything was exactly where it should be, except for the young woman sitting cross-legged on his mattress like she owned the place. She had dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, and she wasn't wearing any shoes. Her feet were tucked under her as she typed on a laptop that definitely wasn't his. She was wearing an oversized gray sweater that looked soft and comfortable, paired with simple jeans that had a small tear at the knee. What struck Jake the most was how relaxed she looked, as if sitting on a stranger's bed was the most normal thing in the world. Around her were scattered various items that clearly didn't belong to Jake. A colorful backpack sat open on the floor, spilling out art supplies and notebooks. A water bottle with stickers from different cities stood on his nightstand. There were even some clothes folded neatly on his chair, the same chair where he always placed his jacket. The woman looked up when she heard the door close. She didn't seem surprised or embarrassed to see him. Instead, she smiled and gave a small wave as if greeting an old friend. "Oh, hello there," she said with a slight accent that Jake couldn't immediately place. "You must be the roommate they mentioned. I'm Luna." Jake stood frozen in the doorway, his keys still in his hand. His brain was trying to process what was happening, but nothing made sense. "Roommate?" he finally managed to say. "I don't have a roommate. This is my apartment. Who are you? How did you get in here?" Luna tilted her head, looking genuinely confused. "Wait, what? But this is apartment 3B, right? I have all the paperwork." She reached into her backpack and pulled out a folder filled with documents. "Look, here's my housing assignment, my rental agreement, everything." She held out the papers, and Jake reluctantly took them. His hands were shaking slightly as he read through the official university letterhead and the housing department seal. Everything looked legitimate. The address was correct down to the apartment number. The dates showed she was supposed to move in today. "This has to be some kind of mistake," Jake said, running his hand through his hair. "I've been living here for 2 years. I have a lease. I pay rent every month." "Well, so do I," Luna said, pulling out her phone. "Or at least I'm supposed to start paying next week. Look, here's my confirmation email, and here's my student ID showing I'm part of the international exchange program." Jake stared at the phone screen, seeing official emails from the same housing department that had assigned him this apartment. His mind was racing. How could this happen? How could the university assign the same apartment to 2 different people? "Listen," Luna continued. "I know this is weird, but I've been traveling for 16 hours to get here. My flight was delayed, then my bus broke down, and I've been carrying all my stuff around campus for hours trying to find this place. The housing office was closed when I finally got here, so I couldn't ask anyone for help." She paused and looked around the small space. "The maintenance guy let me in when I showed him my paperwork. He seemed just as confused as you do, but the documents looked official, so he gave me the spare key." Jake felt a headache coming on. This was exactly the kind of chaos he tried to avoid in his life. Everything was supposed to be simple and predictable. Wake up, go to class, study, sleep, repeat. Now there was a stranger in his home, and she looked like she had no intention of leaving anytime soon. "Okay, but you can see I live here, right?" Jake gestured around the room. "This is all my stuff, my books, my desk, my bed that you're currently sitting on." Luna looked around and nodded. "Yeah, I can see that." and I'm really sorry about this confusion. But look at it from my perspective. I'm in a foreign country, I don't know anyone, and I have nowhere else to go. The housing department told me this was my assigned room for the semester. She closed her laptop and scooted to the edge of the bed. I tried calling them, but their office hours ended at 5. I left 3 voicemails and sent 2 emails, but I probably won't hear back until tomorrow morning at the earliest. Jake looked at his watch. It was now past 10:30 and he had an early class the next day. The practical part of his brain told him to call campus security and have this sorted out immediately. But another part of him, a part he didn't often listen to, felt bad for Luna. She did seem genuinely confused and tired. "So what exactly are you suggesting?" Jake asked. Luna shrugged. "I guess we wait until tomorrow and let the housing office figure out their mistake. In the meantime, maybe we can share the space for one night? I promise I'm not dangerous or anything, I'm just a student like you." Jake looked around his small studio apartment. There was barely enough room for one person, let alone 2. His couch was old and uncomfortable, and he'd never had an overnight guest before. The whole situation felt surreal. "This is insane," he muttered. "I know," Luna agreed. "But sometimes life is insane, right? Sometimes things happen that we don't plan for, and we just have to figure it out as we go." As she spoke, Jake noticed that despite the chaos of the situation, Luna seemed remarkably calm. She wasn't demanding anything or getting upset. She was just stating facts and trying to find a reasonable solution. It was almost admirable, though Jake would never admit that out loud. The silence stretched between them as Jake tried to decide what to do. He could call campus security, but that seemed harsh. He could demand that Luna leave, but where would she go this late at night? He could try to find her alternative accommodation, but he didn't even know where to start. Luna seemed to sense his internal struggle. "Look, I understand this is your space, and I'm not trying to take over. I just need somewhere to sleep tonight, and tomorrow we'll get this sorted out properly." Jake realized he was still holding her paperwork. Everything looked official, and her story made sense, even if the situation was completely bizarre. Against his better judgment, he found himself considering her request. "Fine," he said finally. "One night. But tomorrow morning, first thing, we're going to the housing office and getting this mess straightened out." Luna's face lit up with relief. "Thank you so much. I really appreciate this, and I promise I won't be any trouble." As Jake looked around his suddenly crowded apartment, he had a feeling that promise might be harder to keep than either of them realized. Jake woke up with a stiff neck and the worst backache of his life. For a confused moment, he couldn't understand why he was on his couch instead of his bed. Then the events of the previous night came rushing back, and he groaned quietly. Luna was still here. This wasn't a weird dream. He could hear movement in the kitchen area, along with the gentle sound of running water. The smell of coffee filled the small apartment, which was strange because Jake only drank instant coffee, and this smelled much better than anything that came from his usual morning routine. Jake sat up slowly, trying to work out the kinks in his back. His couch was definitely not meant for sleeping. It was old and lumpy, and one of the cushions had a spring that poked through no matter how he arranged himself. He'd spent most of the night tossing and turning, listening to unfamiliar sounds from his own apartment. "Good morning," came Luna's cheerful voice from the kitchen. "I hope I didn't wake you up." Jake looked over to see Luna standing barefoot by his small stove, stirring something in a pan. She was wearing different clothes than the night before. A simple blue t-shirt and the same jeans, but her hair was now loose around her shoulders. Somehow she managed to look completely refreshed, like she'd slept in a luxury hotel instead of someone else's bed. "You're making breakfast?" Jake asked, his voice still rough from sleep. "I hope that's okay," Luna said, glancing back at him, with a smile. "I found some eggs in your fridge and a few other things. I figured it was the least I could do after taking over your bed last night." Jake stood up and stretched, trying to ignore how domestic this whole scene felt. This was temporary, he reminded himself. They were going to sort this out today, and by tonight his apartment would be back to normal. But as he watched Luna move around his kitchen with surprising familiarity, flipping eggs and toasting bread, he felt a strange sensation. His apartment had always been quiet in the mornings. Just him, his instant coffee, and his daily routine. Now there was life in the space, movement and sound, and the smell of real food. I also made coffee, Luna continued, pointing to his coffee maker. I found some actual coffee beans hidden behind your instant stuff. They were probably expensive, so I hope you don't mind that I use them. Jake blinked. He'd forgotten about those coffee beans. His sister had given them to him months ago, insisting that he needed to treat himself better. They'd been sitting unused because Jake never bothered with anything that took extra time in the morning. It's fine, he said, walking over to pour himself a cup. The coffee was incredible, rich and smooth in a way that made his usual instant coffee seem like dirty water. Luna served the eggs onto 2 plates along with perfectly golden toast. I wasn't sure how you like your eggs, so I made them over easy. Hope that works. They sat at Jake's small table, which normally only had 1 chair. Luna had somehow found his folding chair from the closet and set up what looked like an actual breakfast setup, complete with napkins and even a small glass of orange juice. So, Luna said, cutting into her eggs, what's the plan for today? When does the housing office open? 8:30, Jake replied, taking a bite of the best breakfast he'd had in months. We should probably get there right when they open. This whole situation is crazy. Luna nodded, but she didn't seem as stressed about it as Jake felt. It really is strange. I've never heard of something like this happening before. Usually, universities are pretty organized about housing assignments. That's what I thought too, Jake said. I've lived here for 2 years without any problems. My rent gets automatically deducted from my account every month. I have all my paperwork filed properly. And I have all my paperwork too, Luna added. I applied for housing 6 months ago, got accepted into the exchange program, filled out all the forms. Everything seemed perfect until last night. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Jake found himself studying Luna when she wasn't looking. She had an easy way about her, like she could adapt to any situation without getting overwhelmed. It was the complete opposite of how Jake approached life. Can I ask you something? Luna said suddenly. Jake looked up from his eggs. Sure. Do you always keep everything so organized? Jake followed her gaze around the apartment. Everything was exactly where it should be, except for her belongings scattered around. His books were arranged by height and subject. His desk had labeled organizers for different supplies, and even his kitchen items were arranged with military precision. I guess so, Jake said. It's easier when everything has its place. Luna smiled, but it wasn't a mocking smile. That's actually pretty impressive. I'm more of a chaos person myself. I know where things are, but it might not make sense to anyone else. I noticed, Jake said, glancing at her backpack, which was still open with various items spilling out. Sorry about that, Luna laughed. I'll try to keep my mess contained to one corner. After breakfast, Jake got ready for classes while Luna organized her belongings. She seemed to have a surprising amount of stuff for someone who was supposed to be staying temporarily. Art supplies, several notebooks, clothes, and various personal items that suggested she was planning to be here for more than just a few days. What are you studying? Jake asked as he gathered his textbooks. Architecture, Luna replied, holding up a large sketchbook. I'm here for the entire semester, working on a project about sustainable urban housing. What about you? Engineering, Jake said. I'm working on my master's thesis. That's cool. What's your thesis about? Jake paused. He wasn't used to people asking about his work, and he definitely wasn't used to casual conversation in the morning. Structural optimization in earthquake-resistant buildings. Luna's eyes lit up. Really? That's actually related to what I'm studying. We might have more in common than we thought. Before Jake could respond, his phone alarm went off, reminding him that he needed to leave for his early class. The housing office opens in an hour, he said, slinging his backpack over his shoulder. Can you meet me there at 8:30? Absolutely, Luna said. And Jake, thank you again for letting me stay last night. I know this wasn't what you planned. Jake nodded and headed for the door, but as he left, he found himself thinking about Luna's question. Did he always keep everything so organized? And more importantly, why did having someone else in his space feel less terrible than he'd expected? The morning air was crisp as Jake walked across campus, but his mind kept wandering back to his apartment. To Luna making breakfast in his kitchen, to the smell of real coffee, to the way she'd arranged the table like they were old roommates instead of strangers thrown together by a bureaucratic mistake. He shook his head, trying to focus on the day ahead. By tonight, this would all be resolved. Luna would have her own place, and his life would go back to normal. That's what he wanted, right? But as Jake sat through his morning lecture, he found it harder than usual to concentrate. Instead of taking his usual detailed notes, his mind kept drifting to the conversation over breakfast and the way Luna had smiled when she talked about her studies. For the first time in years, Jake was actually looking forward to going home, even though he knew it meant dealing with more chaos and uncertainty. Maybe, just maybe, that wasn't entirely a bad thing. The housing office meeting had been a disaster. After waiting for 2 hours, they'd been told that due to a computer system error during a major software update, several housing assignments had been duplicated. The fix would take at least 2 weeks, maybe 3. Luna couldn't afford hotel costs for that long, and there were no available dorms until someone moved out. So here they were, 3 days later, still sharing Jake's tiny studio apartment. Jake discovered that living with Luna was like trying to study during a music festival. She wasn't loud or obnoxious, but she brought an energy to the space that made it impossible for him to maintain his usual routines. Take last night, for example. Jake always went to bed at exactly 10 p.m. It was part of his schedule, and his schedule was sacred. But Luna seemed to come alive after 9 p.m. She would spread her art supplies across the floor, put on soft music, and work on her architecture projects late into the night. Jake had tried wearing earplugs, but he could still hear her moving around. Sometimes she would pace while thinking, her bare feet making soft sounds on the hardwood floor. Other times she would mutter to herself in what he assumed was Spanish, working through design problems out loud. "Do you have to do that?" Jake had asked around midnight, peering over the edge of his makeshift bed on the couch. Luna looked up from her sketch pad, pencil still in hand. "Do what?" "The pacing and the talking." Luna blinked, looking genuinely confused. "I'm being quiet. I'm whispering. You're whispering in Spanish while walking back and forth across the room. Some of us are trying to sleep." "Oh." Luna looked embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I think better when I move around, and sometimes I switch languages without realizing it. I'll try to be more quiet." But even when she tried to be quiet, Luna's presence filled the space in ways that drove Jake crazy. She left her coffee cup on different surfaces each morning, never in the same place twice. Her art supply somehow migrated across the apartment, so Jake would find colored pencils in the bathroom or sketching paper on his desk. The worst part was how she treated his carefully organized systems. Jake had specific places for everything, but Luna seemed to view his organization as more of a suggestion than a rule. "Why do you keep all your books by size?" Luna asked on their 4th day together, standing in front of his bookshelf with her head tilted. "Because it looks neat and makes them easy to find," Jake replied, not looking up from his engineering. "Textbook. But wouldn't it make more sense to organize them by subject, or by how often you use them?" Jake finally looked up. Luna was holding one of his reference books, a thick manual that belonged on the bottom shelf with the other large textbooks. "Please put that back where it belongs," he said. Luna glanced at the book, then at the shelf, then back at Jake. "It belongs with your other engineering books, right? They're all scattered around by size instead of being grouped together." "The size system works fine. It's been working fine for 2 years." "But look," Luna said, pulling out a few more books. "Your structural engineering books are on 3 different shelves just because they're different sizes. Wouldn't it be easier if related books were together?" Jake stood up quickly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Please, just put them back." Luna paused, seeing the tension in his voice. She carefully placed the books back exactly where they'd been. "Okay, sorry, I was just trying to help." But it wasn't just the books. Luna had opinions about everything in his apartment. She suggested moving his desk to get better natural light. She wondered why he kept his kitchen supplies in hard-to-reach cabinets. She asked why he never opened his windows for fresh air. Each suggestion felt like criticism to Jake. This was his space, his system, his life that worked perfectly well before she arrived. The breaking point came on their 6th day together. Jake had been looking forward to doing laundry, one of his favorite weekly routines. He had a specific system: whites first, then colors, then delicates. Each load was sorted precisely, and he used the exact amount of detergent for each type of fabric. When he went to collect his clothes from the laundry room in the basement, he found Luna there, pulling his clothes out of the dryer and mixing them with her own colorful garments. "What are you doing?" Jake asked, staring at his white shirts tangled up with Luna's bright red sweater. "I thought I'd help with the laundry," Luna said cheerfully. "I threw some of my things in with your load, more efficient, right?" Jake felt his heart rate spike as he grabbed one of his white dress shirts. It was now a pale pink color. "You put colors in with my whites," he said, his voice getting higher. Luna looked at the shirt in his hands, and her smile faded. "Oh no. I'm so sorry, I didn't think—" "This shirt cost $60, Jake said, holding up the ruined garment. "I wore it to presentations and job interviews. It was one of my only good shirts." "I can replace it," Luna said quickly. "I'll buy you a new one." "That's not the point." Jake's voice echoed in the small laundry room. "The point is that you can't just change systems that work. You can't just assume that your way is better and mess with other people's things." Luna took a step back, surprised by his outburst. "Jake, I was trying to help." "I don't need your help," Jake said, grabbing his laundry basket. "I don't need you reorganizing my books or rearranging my kitchen or ruining my clothes. I just need you to leave my stuff alone." "Fine," Luna said, her voice getting quiet. "But maybe the problem isn't me messing with your stuff. Maybe the problem is that you've built yourself a prison, and you're mad that someone else can see the bars." Jake stared at her. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Look at your life, Jake, really look at it. You have no pictures of friends or family anywhere. Your calendar is empty except for classes and study time. You eat the same meals every day. You go to bed at exactly the same time every night. And you've organized everything so perfectly that there's no room for anything unexpected or spontaneous or fun." Luna pulled her own clothes out of the dryer, her movements sharp with frustration. "I've been here almost a week and I haven't seen you talk to a single person other than me. When's the last time you did something just because it sounded interesting? When's the last time you let yourself be surprised?" Jake felt heat rising in his cheeks. "My life works fine the way it is." "Does it?" Luna challenged. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're so afraid of anything going wrong that you've forgotten how to actually live." They stood in the laundry room, surrounded by the warm smell of detergent and the sound of other machines running. Jake wanted to argue, to defend his choices and his lifestyle, but Luna's words had hit something deep that he didn't want to examine. "You don't know anything about me," he said finally. Luna softened slightly. "You're right, I don't. But I know what I see, and what I see is someone who's built walls so high that even he can't see over them anymore." She gathered her laundry and headed for the door. "I'll try harder to respect your systems, Jake. But maybe you could try to remember that sometimes the best things in life are the ones that mess up our plans." Jake stood alone in the laundry room, holding his ruined shirt and feeling like something inside his chest was cracking open. He'd worked so hard to create a life where nothing could go wrong, where everything was predictable and safe. But as he walked back upstairs to his apartment, Jake found himself wondering if Luna might be right. When was the last time he'd been truly surprised? When was the last time he'd done something just for fun? And why did the thought of Luna eventually leaving make him feel more empty than relieved? After their fight in the laundry room, Jake and Luna barely spoke for 2 whole days. The tiny apartment felt even smaller when filled with awkward silence and careful politeness. They moved around each other like strangers, saying only the necessary. Words about bathroom schedules and whose turn it was to take out the trash. Jake threw himself into his studies even more than usual, staying at the library until it closed just to avoid being in the apartment. When he did come home, Luna would already be asleep, or at least pretending to be. Her art supplies stayed, neatly contained to one corner, and she wore headphones even during the day. But the silence was driving Jake crazy in ways he hadn't expected. He'd gotten used to Luna's soft humming while she worked, the gentle sound of her bare feet on the floor, even her habit of talking to herself in Spanish. Now the apartment felt dead and empty, even when she was there. On the third night after their fight, Jake came home late from the library to find Luna sitting at his small table with her laptop open and papers spread everywhere. She was working on what looked like architectural drawings, but these weren't her usual sketches. These were detailed, professional-looking blueprints. "Sorry," Luna said without looking up when she heard him come in. "I'll clean this up in a minute." Jake set down his backpack and looked more closely at what she was working on. The drawings showed his apartment, but not as it currently existed. Luna had redesigned the entire space, showing how furniture could be rearranged and walls could be modified to make the studio more functional. "Are those blueprints of this place?" Jake asked, forgetting that they weren't really talking. Luna glanced up, surprised that he'd spoken to her. "Yeah, it's just a project I'm working on. Nothing serious." But Jake could see it was much more than that. The drawings were incredibly detailed and thoughtful. Luna had figured out how to create separate sleeping and studying areas without building actual walls. She'd designed built-in storage solutions that would triple the available space. Most importantly, she'd managed to preserve the organized, structured feeling that Jake needed while making the space feel warm and welcoming. "This is really good," Jake said, pulling out the folding chair to sit across from her. Luna looked surprised. "You think so? I mean, I don't know much about architecture, but this looks professional. You've thought of everything." Jake pointed to one section of the drawing. "You even figured out how to fit a proper desk area and a comfortable seating space. I noticed you don't have anywhere to relax except your bed," Luna said, warming up slightly. "Everyone needs a space where they can just sit and think without being in work mode." Jake studied the drawings more carefully. Luna had paid attention to all his habits and needs. She'd created a system for his books that was both organized and accessible. She'd designed storage solutions that would keep everything tidy but not rigid. "Why did you do this?" Jake asked. Luna was quiet for a moment, then she closed her laptop and looked at him directly. "Because I felt terrible about the shirt, and about what I said in the laundry room." "You felt terrible about what you said? But you were right." Luna shook her head. "I was partially right, maybe, but I was also cruel. I judged your life without understanding why you live the way you do. That wasn't fair." Jake felt something loosen in his chest. "I haven't exactly been easy to live with either." "You've been more patient than most people would be," Luna said. "Some stranger takes over your space, messes with your stuff, ruins your clothes, and you still let me stay. That says something about who you are." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, looking at the blueprint spread between them. "Can I ask you something?" Luna said eventually. Jake nodded. "Why is control so important to you?" "I'm not judging. I'm genuinely curious." Jake had been dreading this conversation, but sitting here with Luna's thoughtful drawings in front of him, he found himself wanting to answer honestly. "My parents got divorced when I was 12, he said slowly. "It wasn't a friendly divorce. They fought about everything, including me. One week I'd be at my mom's house, the next week at my dad's, and neither place ever felt stable." Luna listened without interrupting, her attention completely focused on him. "My mom would rearrange the furniture every few months, trying to start fresh. My dad moved 3 times in 2 years, each place smaller and more depressing than the last. I never knew where my stuff would be or if it would still be there when I got back." Jake looked around his carefully organized apartment. "When I finally got my own place, I swore that nothing would ever be chaotic or unpredictable again. Everything would have its place and nothing would change unless I decided it should change." "That makes perfect sense," Luna said quietly. "Does it? Because sometimes I think you were right. Sometimes I think I've built myself a prison." Luna reached across the table and touched his hand briefly. It's not a prison if it keeps you safe, but maybe it could be a little more flexible without being chaotic. Over the next hour, Luna walked Jake through her redesign ideas, explaining how each change would maintain order while creating more comfort and functionality. She showed him storage solutions that were even more organized than his current system, but warmer and more inviting. The thing is, Luna said as she rolled up the blueprints, I think we're both trying to solve the same problem in different ways. What do you mean? I think we both want to feel at home somewhere. You create home through control and organization. I create home through adaptability and comfort. But maybe the best homes have both. Jake found himself nodding. Maybe. That's why this has been so hard. We're both trying to make this place feel like home, but in completely opposite ways. Exactly. But what if we didn't have to choose? What if we could find a way that works for both of us? Later that night, as Jake lay on the couch, he thought about everything Luna had said. For the first time in years, he found himself imagining what it might be like to have a space that was organized but not rigid, structured but not cold. He thought about Luna's blueprints and how much thought she'd put into understanding his needs. He thought about how she'd apologized for judging him, even though her criticism had contained uncomfortable truths. Most of all, he thought about how the apartment had felt during those 2 days of silence, empty and lifeless even though all his things were exactly where they belonged. Maybe Luna was right. Maybe the best homes had both structure and warmth, organization and flexibility, solitude and companionship. As he drifted off to sleep, Jake realized he was no longer counting down the days until Luna would leave. Instead, he was starting to imagine what it might be like if she stayed. The call from the housing office came on a Tuesday morning while Jake and Luna were sharing breakfast. They'd developed a comfortable routine over the past week since their conversation about the blueprints. Luna made coffee, Jake handled the eggs, and they'd actually started talking about their classes and projects. Luna answered her phone on the second ring, putting it on speaker so Jake could hear. Good news, said the cheerful voice from the housing office. We found you a room in Henderson Hall. It's a single, and it's available starting Thursday. Can you move in this week? Jake watched Luna's face as she processed the information. For a moment, neither of them said anything. That's great, Luna finally replied, though her voice didn't sound particularly excited. Thursday. Works fine. Perfect, we'll email you all the details. Again, we're so sorry for the confusion with your original assignment. After Luna hung up, they sat in silence, picking at their breakfast. The news they'd been waiting for had finally come, but somehow it didn't feel like the relief Jake had expected. So, Luna said eventually, I guess I'll be out of your hair soon. Yeah, Jake replied. You must be excited to have your own space. Sure, Luna said, but she was looking down at her coffee cup instead of at him. The next day, Wednesday, felt strange. Luna started packing her things, slowly organizing her belongings back into her colorful suitcases and bags. Jake found himself watching her pack, noticing how empty the apartment was starting to look again. You know, Jake said as Luna folded her art supplies back into their carrying case. You never showed me your final project, the one you were working on for your sustainable housing class. Luna looked up, surprised. You want to see it? If you don't mind. Luna pulled out her large sketchbook and opened it to a series of detailed drawings. The project was about creating affordable housing that could adapt to different family sizes and needs, using flexible wall systems and multi-purpose furniture. This is incredible, Jake said, studying the intricate designs. You've thought of everything. How families grow and change, how people use spaces differently, how to make small areas feel larger. Thanks, Luna said, a small smile crossing her face. I've been thinking a lot about adaptability versus stability lately. How to create homes that can change without losing their essential character. Jake knew she was talking about more than just architecture. That evening, as they ate dinner together for what might be the last time, Jake found himself memorizing details he'd never paid attention to before. The way Luna tucked one foot under her when she sat. How she always saved The best bite of her meal for last, the small scar on her left hand that she'd mentioned getting from a childhood art project gone wrong. "I have something for you," Luna said suddenly, reaching into her backpack. She pulled out a rolled-up paper and handed it to Jake. It was a final version of the apartment redesign she'd been working on, but this one was different. It was drawn like a real architectural plan, complete with measurements and material specifications. "Luna, this is too much," Jake said, unrolling the detailed blueprint. "It's not too much, it's a thank you, and maybe a suggestion if you ever decide you want to make some changes." Jake studied the drawing. Luna had incorporated everything they'd talked about over the past weeks. Storage solutions that were both organized and accessible. A layout that created distinct areas without walls. Ways to make the space feel larger and more welcoming without sacrificing functionality. "I don't know what to say," Jake admitted. "You don't have to say anything, just promise me you'll think about it." That night, Jake lay on his couch looking at Luna's blueprint by the light of his desk lamp. In just a few weeks, she'd understood his space better than he did. She'd seen possibilities he'd never considered, ways to improve his life that didn't require giving up the things that made him feel secure. But more than that, she'd seen him, really seen him, in a way that no one else ever had. The next morning, Thursday, came too quickly. Luna had most of her things packed and ready to go. The apartment looked almost exactly like it had before she'd arrived, except for the coffee beans on the counter and a small potted plant she'd bought to brighten up the windowsill. "I can give you a ride to your new dorm," Jake offered as Luna shouldered her backpack. "That's okay, I already called a campus taxi, should be here any minute." They stood awkwardly by the door, both of them seeming to search for the right words. "Thank you," Luna said finally. "For everything. For letting me stay, for being patient with me, for sharing your space even when I made it chaotic. Thank you for the blueprints, and for the coffee, and for—" Jake paused, trying to figure out how to say what he really meant. "For what?" "For showing me that change doesn't have to mean chaos." Luna smiled, the first real smile Jake had seen from her since the phone call. "And thank you for showing me that structure doesn't have to mean boring." A car honked outside. "That's my ride," Luna said. Jake watched her gather her last few belongings. "Luna?" She turned back to him. "What if you didn't go?" Luna paused, her hand on the door handle. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if we made this official? Split the rent, both of our names on the lease. What if we tried being actual roommates instead of just two people thrown together by a housing mistake?" Luna stared at him. "Are you serious?" "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." Jake felt his heart racing, but he kept talking. "I know we're different, I know it would take some adjusting, but these past few weeks, I don't want to go back to how things were before." The taxi honked again. "I like having coffee that doesn't taste like water," Jake continued. "I like having someone to eat breakfast with. I like the way you think about problems differently than I do. I even like your late-night Spanish muttering, though I'll never admit that again." Luna laughed, and the sound filled the apartment in a way that Jake had almost forgotten. "What about your routines, your systems, your need for everything to be organized? We'll figure it out. You showed me it's possible to have both structure and flexibility. Maybe we can teach each other." Luna looked around the apartment, then back at Jake. "You really want me to stay?" "I really want you to stay." Luna walked to the window and waved at the taxi driver, indicating he should leave without her. Then she dropped her backpack and turned back to Jake with a grin. "Okay, but I have conditions." "Name them." "I get to implement at least some of my design ideas for this place." "Deal. And I get to teach you how to make proper coffee." "Fine. And you have to promise to try doing at least one spontaneous thing every week." Jake hesitated for just a moment, then nodded. "Deal. But you have to promise to try following at least some organizational systems." "Deal," Luna laughed. 3 months later, Jake came home from the library to find Luna sitting cross-legged on their new, much more comfortable couch, working on a project with her art supplies spread out on the coffee table they'd built together from Luna's design. The apartment looked completely different now. Luna's organizational systems had merged with Jake's in ways that somehow worked perfectly. There was still a place for everything, but the places were warmer, more flexible, more alive. "How was class?" Luna asked, looking up from her sketches. "Good," Jake said, settling down beside her. "How's the project coming?" "Almost finished. Want to see?" Jake looked at Luna's latest architectural drawings. She was still working on sustainable housing, but now her designs incorporated ideas about structured flexibility that reminded Jake of their own living situation. "It's perfect," Jake said. And it was. Not because everything was exactly where it should be, or because nothing ever changed, but because they'd found a way to build something together that honored both of their needs. Luna had appeared in his room barefoot and claimed his spot. But in doing so, she'd helped him discover that the best homes aren't the ones where nothing ever changes. They're the ones where change and stability can coexist. Where two different people can create something better together than either could build alone. As Jake watched Luna work, her feet tucked under her, and a small smile on her face, he realized that sometimes the best things in life really are the ones that completely disrupt our plans.